Have you ever had the experience of running into somebody in a place where you didn't expect to see them? Maybe you're on a trip in another state and you run into a coworker or a neighbor. Doesn't it kind of take a second to register? I remember not long ago, I was out at Metro Community College and just walking down the hall, and I spotted this young man. And I thought, there's something very familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. And I could kind of tell that he was looking back at me like maybe he recognized me too. But fearing looking like a fool, I didn't want to go up to him and say, hey, how do we know each other? But luckily for me, he was more courageous. And he said, is your name Doug? And immediately, when he said the first word, I knew exactly who he was. He was a young man that lived in our house when we were family teachers at Boys Town. Now keep in mind, he was 16 at the time, and this is 20-some years later. But what a joyous reunion it was when I recognized him. In tonight's gospel, we hear another account of the disciples where Jesus is in their midst, but they fail to recognize him. And we might be tempted to say, come on now, folks. Jesus told you exactly how this was going to go, and yet you're struggling to recognize him. But before we're too critical, we may want to ask ourselves the same question. How often do we fail to recognize Jesus in our midst? Because Jesus desires to encounter us at all times and in all places. It's what we believe. It's not some of the time, some of the places. Jesus desires to encounter you and me, and to bring us peace. Right? And this encounter is especially true when we're despairing, when we're discouraged, when we're in pain. I was visiting with a man after he had lost his mother. And he had a really close relationship with his mom. She lived with him. He helped take care of her. They had certain traditions that they did every week. And when I was talking to him, he said, I knew this was going to be hard, but I really had no idea. He said, but I'll share an experience I had. He said, about a week or 10 days after she had passed away, I came home from work. And he said it really hadn't been a particularly good day at work. He said, I walked to the mailbox to get the mail. And as I'm thumbing through it, he said, I came across a letter that was addressed to my mom. And he said, I don't know what it was about that letter. But he said, immediately I was overcome with grief. He said, I sat down on the step by my mailbox and wept. He said, I don't know how long I was sitting there, but all of a sudden, my neighbor from across the street was sitting next to me. And then she put her arm around me and allowed me to cry on her shoulder. And he said, there's something you have to know about this neighbor. He said, she moved in a couple years ago. He said, and other than a wave, we've never spoken 2 words to each other. He said, in fact, I don't know if she understands English. But he said, I realized at that moment that God was loving me through her. That God was comforting me through her. When we recognize Jesus in our midst, it's a beautiful thing. Today, tonight, let's ask for the grace to be able to recognize Jesus in our midst, in the people around us, in the people who love us, so that Jesus can, in fact, encounter us and bring us his peace.